Hi, everybody. My name is William Walter. I am the Managing Director of Bridgehead Communications. We're a political and media consultancy based in the city. I'm proud to welcome you here today for this talk. We're due to talk for about 45 minutes. And as a bit of housekeeping, if you have any questions, if you could please submit them via the chat function at the bottom of your screens, and our panelists will try to answer them during the briefing. So I'd like to begin by introducing today's panelists. So we have Paul and Bart. So Paul Katrakassis is the CEO and founder of Aqua Partners. He's a leading innovation and technology company M&A expert and the author of Go Tech or Go Extinct: How Acquiring Tech Disruptors is the Key. And joining us from the other side of the pond, from the US, is Dr. Bart Sale, CEO and founder of Breakthrough Global. He's a global authority on business culture, leadership, and innovation. He is also, like Paul, a fellow author. Published by Penguin, his book, Riding the Blue Train, is a business book bestseller. Paul's firm and Bart's firm began working together about a year ago. They saw a new way their expertise and guidance could help companies in a way that hadn't existed previously. They also both believe that this period of pandemic and uncertainty for so many people and companies is an opportune time, not just for preservation, but also for deep reflection and transformation. And that's why they wanted to share their thoughts with you today, because it's the perfect time to do so. Paul, thanks to you first.
I will.
As an investment banker by trade, what was it that attracted you, that stimulated you to go and work with Bart, given his kind of focus on companies and culture, and driving results through those forums?
Right. Well, good question. Why would I team up with a culture mindset company transformation guru or guide, I should say, Bart? Well, it really started about 3.5 years ago when we began our mission of, we call it techquisition, helping large non-tech legacy established companies help their own transformation by finding the right tech and digital companies to partner with, to invest in and acquire, to accelerate their own development. It's something that was really quite new. I point out in the book and tell many people it was the Walmart acquisition of Jet.com in August 2016 that really alerted me to this new development. And I learned early on, probably in the first year and a half, after talking with many senior executives at these larger companies, that there was more going on behind the scenes. There was more blocking the ability for them to execute on the things that they knew, in theory, they should execute on. And the more and more conversations that I had, I started to see that these were fundamentally limiting beliefs that the executives had formed very often as a result of the culture that had built over time. And when I started talking to Bart about this, we just hit it off immediately and smiled, and it was, the light bulbs all went off. So I'm happy to get into that detail here today, but that was really the reason why we came together.
And why is so culture? Why is culture breakthrough so important? Isn't, like, ultimately it strikes me that there's a bit of a contrast between the kind of cultural aspects of the work. There's quite a strong contrast between the financial background that you've had, the kind of facts and figures, as opposed to less tangible areas like culture.
So we talked about this, and actually I decided the best way to answer that question is read to you a quote from Lou Gerstner. It's a quote that I put in my book about, you don't break culture, you bend it. And Lou Gerstner, for those who don't know, is really a business hero, certainly an American business hero, formerly a senior position at McKinsey and former CEO of RJR Nabisco and also IBM. where he wrote the book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? So I'll read this quote, which I think perfectly encapsulates the answer to your question. He said, "Until I came to IBM, I probably would have told you that culture was just one among several important elements in any organization's makeup and success, along with vision, strategy, marketing, financials, and the like. I came to see in my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. In the end, an organization is nothing more than the collective capacity of its people to create value." And after I had met with at least 300 companies, one-on-one, at essentially C-suite level, did that quote resonate with me incredibly powerfully. Because the one takeaway from all those meetings and from many of our assignments, working with these companies and consulting with them, is that culture is in fact the game. Culture's everything. It tends to determine how an organization behaves and acts and executes on its goals, on its mission, and how it decides. Because ultimately, certainly in my view, and I'm dying now to hear Bart's view on this, in my view, a company's success is determined really by just one thing, and that's making the decision. If it knows a certain path is the right path to take from a strategic review or analysis or assessment, whatever it might be, then it just has to decide to take that path. And what I found was it's very difficult for companies to make those decisions, probably mainly because there's always some competing priority. There's always something that gets in the way. There's inertia, and very often people leave their position, leave their role, and then everything falls apart. But it's this competing priorities. There's always something more important next quarter, next week, or next budget period, next year, that prevents the company from executing on the decision that it made with regard to that major important strategic direction.
Good. Well, if I can come in there, and very eloquently put, Paul, it's probably surprising you that the person in England is speaking American, the person in America is speaking English. Yeah, we just need that to surprise you. But good morning, good afternoon. I think we've got some good evenings as well on the webinar. I'm Bart. And before I get into this, actually, what I'd like to do is really ask you a question to the audience. And that question is, why are you here? Why are you on this briefing? What made you come here? I don't want you to tell me. I want you to just focus on that. And then what I'd like you to get from this is whatever you came on for, certainly, but also I'd really like you to get as much value as you can. And beyond the information that we talk about. So I'd like you to start thinking about, at the end of it or during it, what insights are you getting from this for yourself, for your life, for your business, for your people in your business if you manage them. And I wish you well with that, because that's why we want to do this, to give you value. In terms of culture, it's a little bit of my journey. So I've been working on culture for well over 30 years and started it when I worked in the corporate world. I worked in Unilever, and I was a director of innovation there. And towards the end of my days there, one of the things that we realized is that we were less innovative than we had been. And our innovation capability, our innovation capacity was certainly plateauing, if not declining, across the world. So I decided to take that on as a special assignment. And at the time, you know, we are talking 30 years ago, culture wasn't really talked about in organizations. It was, now it is, but then it wasn't. And so people talked about organizational design and organizational development and structure and so on. But to cut a long story short, one of the insight I got then is that it was our culture that was the problem. We tried many different things to improve our innovation. So we tried new techniques, we brought new people in, But what happened is we'd get a spike, so we'd get a little spurt of growth, a little spurt of innovation, and then it would settle back to the status quo. And what it was the culture, which was a very strong culture, but it wasn't an innovative culture. And the culture was putting a glass ceiling on our ability to innovate and really break out and go into new business. And so I put together a program which I call Breakthrough, because we needed to break through the glass ceiling. So whenever you think of breakthrough, that's what it is. It's like there's a limitation, there's a glass ceiling, there's a structure that you can't break out of. And that's what the breakthrough is. So back to some of the things that Paul raised. As you can see, I believe culture is everything. And in the world today, more people realize that. Some people are very active working on that. Some are less active. Some just know about it and can talk about it, but don't do anything about it. And really, again, the second question for you is, whatever business or institution you're in, at your level, and you may be the leader of that, you may be leading a department or leading a division or leading a strategic unit. Are you managing your culture? Or is it managing you? If you're not managing it, it's managing you. And if we don't pay attention to it, if it becomes a blind spot, then it develops in its own way. And that might not be a culture that's innovative, that's performance oriented, that's purpose driven. You just sort of drift. And what we need to do is build cultures by design, not by drifting.
So Bart, can I comment on that? This by design, I think, is critical, absolutely critical. Given that we're in this pandemic situation, hopefully we're coming out of it soon, whether it's treatment or vaccine, but we're going to have, for sure, some severe economic consequences continue for some time, and we don't know what they're going to look like. So what I have been hearing, naturally, as you can expect from many executives who I talk with, is that we need to batten down the hatches. We need to protect, we need to preserve, safeguard, conserve cash, ensure our people are okay, protect the supply chain, ensure we're resilient. And that's what you expect. Of course, that's job number one, is to protect the fort. My concern is that develops into a mindset, that this is produced by an element of fear because we're human. So it's very hard to avoid this feeling of fear. When something happens, there's a shock, a meteor crashes on the earth, and we're fearful. It's natural. So let's recognize that we're operating in part out of fear when we do these things like cutting our OPEX, we cut T&E, we cut whatever we can cut, CapEx, et cetera, that's not absolutely required for operations. What I'm concerned with is the almost subconscious effects of that, right? So there's this reaction based on this meteor that's crashed to Earth. But what are we doing about being proactive? And it just so happened, I mean, preparing for this chat with you, I did a little research and I found that there was a BCG study that came out last month that reported an analysis on the previous crisis. So from 2008, 2009 credit crisis, reported on the performance of the companies within the S&P Global 1200 between 2008 and 2020, before the pandemic. And very interestingly, it points out that the top 25 companies in terms of EBITDA performance, where I think they had something like a 25% increase in EBITDA versus the average of the 1200, 4%, and also total shareholder return, or again, I think the top 25 had an average annual growth of 21% shareholder return versus the average of 3 or 4%. Turned out that the number one factor that was common among those top 25 was that they were proactive, and that while they were protecting the fort, they also powered through their growth plan during that down period. And one of the things that many of them did was make strategic acquisitions, which of course I find very interesting. And it's what I think is one of the few phenomenal opportunities available to companies today, as long as you're not on the edge of bankruptcy and you're really fighting for your life. If you're relatively healthy, there are a few things that you could do that would be better than pursuing the right strategic acquisition, as long as it was in line with the rest of the company strategy. And then the other comments were similar around vitality and around the mindset. And then yesterday, I just read that McKinsey had a similar article. They went back and looked at companies that came out of the crisis in 2008 and how they performed all the way to, I think, 2017, and very similar conclusion, including growth and acquisitions. So to me, what separates those top 25 or top 50 from the other 1,150 or 1,100 companies? What is it? Is it their business model? Is it their industry? Is it the product they're selling? Of course, today we've seen that airlines have had a problem, and certain retailers who have built a model that depends on people turning up a physical store have a problem. That's obvious. But in the less obvious cases, out of those 1,200, what is that defining difference between the top 25 or top 50 and the rest? And I wonder how much of that is culture and mindset, that we're not going to react out of fear. We're not going to be the 80% was the number BCG quoted. 80% of the 1,200 reacted. We're going to be the ones that are proactive. So I'm just interested in your views on that and how much you think that depends on the culture of a company.
Absolutely, it does. It depends on the culture and the leadership, which really should be fully integrated. But let's go back to you talked about, the natural human thing to fear things. We do have things to fear at the moment, and they're life-threatening. So that would be a common instant reaction. But I think the thing that distinguishes the companies that will succeed through this are the companies that are the most flexible and most adaptable. And if you look in the area of evolution and ecology, there's a principle there, and it's called the principle of requisite variety. You don't need to remember that from now on. But basically what it means is that when there is a challenge to the environment, that the species that can adapt to that and create and are flexible and can create new forms of behavior are the ones over time that will survive. They're the ones that have got the greatest variety of response. And a classic one in ecology is probably something you're all thinking of now, the blue-ringed octopus. So the blue-ringed octopus lives on the barrier reef, and it lives in a very particular part of the barrier reef at a certain depth, a certain temperature, certain salinity. And it's master of its environment. In fact, it's not very big. It's about that big. And if it bites you, you will die. It's got a neurotoxin that there is no cure to. You die in minutes. So it's a master of its environment. But the problem is the environment's changing. So the barrier reef, the temperature is warming and so on. And as a species, it's not going to survive. It will be extinct eventually because it cannot adapt to a new environment. Whereas there's other species which can adapt whatever the environment is. And the three particularly in the world is the rat, the cockroach, and the human being. An interesting link there because we co-evolve and we're far more adaptable. But some humans are more adaptable to others. And it's the same with companies. So you think of companies that you know, that you've interviewed, that you've worked with. And, stepping back, you can see some companies that actually have inbuilt in their DNA, in their culture, the ability to adapt, the flexibility. They're led in a way that allows that to happen, versus others which can only react. Now, you talked about reaction. There's reaction and there's response. They're very different. So human beings can do one of either. It often depends on how we interpret a threat. So there's an event, and if we interpret that as a threat, we go into reactive mode. And when we go into reactive mode, all of our defenses come up. We get tunnel vision. We only see what's in front of us. we get into a negative emotional state, and actually it goes through a cycle. So it just increases and increases and increases. You get stressed out. The response is where you take the same event, the very same event, and you interpret it differently. So you give it a different meaning. And by giving it a different meaning, you go into a completely different type of action, and that's a response. Action and a response is that a response has choice. It's like two molecules coming together and reacting. But a response, you've got a choice between the event and your interpretation of it, and then what you're going to do about that.
So, Bart, what I think would be useful is describing how that can work in an organization, especially today. And I'm reminded of my first question to you on this, which is, well, what is culture, but how do you get these results, right? What is the special sauce? How do you do it? And I remember you saying, well, we focus on these big goals, like doubling revenue in 5 years, or going from number 3 or 4 market share to number 1. Big goals that absolutely move the needle, which is what our business is focused on, moving the needle. That's what it's all about. Yeah. And that's why we hit it off, because that's your focus. You move the needle for the entire company, starting with the board and the executive team. And I remember asking you, out of the, 20 or so major clients you've had in the last 10 years, how many of those clients achieved their goal, their main giant, BHAG goal that they signed on with you? And I think you said, 19 out of 20, or essentially every single one. And I was blown away by that. And I said, why isn't every company doing this? And I think you said, well, it's because you're a shitty marketer or something like that. But I think what people are interested in.
I said our marketing is shit. Yeah.
There we go. That's more like it. So, and I think people are interested in, and myself included, I'm always interested in this, is how do you do it? I mean, what is the, I don't want to say the technique, but why does this work? Because culture is, especially to people like me from the finance world, it tends to be viewed and perceived as a soft thing. Is there anything tangible you can share with us on that? Maybe it's the 4 mindsets out of your book, that you described, the 4 key mindsets.
Would be good.
Briefly, that might help people understand.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go into the techniques. I mean, the thing is that I'm in the business of transformation. So, there's a lot of consultancies which are very valuable, but they're in the business of information. And I'm in the business of transformation. So it's working with a company or an institution, or it doesn't matter what the actual organization is. I've worked with an order of nuns, for instance, who had run out of what their future vision was because everyone was getting older and they weren't getting recruits. So, that was an incredible transformation. So it's about transformation, and transformation is not the same as change. There's so much change going on, and well, now we're in an incredibly unique situation we've never faced before, but certainly before that, we've worked with companies that have been involved in change projects which have changed things for a while, but then they've gone back. They've gone back to the status quo and back, because all they've done is change. Transformation is taking that change to a tipping point where you never go back. That's what transformation is. You're now in a new place. You're now in a new world. We're getting transformation forced on us at the moment. And actually, some companies will find that very difficult. I've had a keynote for years, which is living in exponential times, because we have been living in exponential times, certainly since the 50s. But the problem with the human mind, it only thinks linearly. So it's very difficult. That's why it's so difficult as getting our, here in America, 100,000 deaths within 3 months. And that's exponential. So coming back to what I do, what I've done over those years is develop a methodology, a sound methodology, which is reproducible. But basically, it's the recipe that works. It's the recipe. And the ingredients vary sometimes depending on what the situation is and where we want to go. But actually, following that recipe, like a chef following a great recipe. You know, people go to restaurants, or they used to go to restaurants. They'll go for a particular chef. That chef is using ingredients that every other restaurant could use, but that chef has put it together in a particular way that creates a masterpiece. So I believe I've put it together in a way that produces these results. We work with ambitious people. You know, I've had my time working with people who are not ambitious, and it's no fun for any of us. And what we do is we work towards an aspiration. We call it an aspiration. It's not going to be something you're going to quote on Wall Street, for instance. It's going to be an internal aspiration for growth and for sustainable growth. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shift and transform the mindsets and the behaviors. Look, culture, there's lots written on culture. You could fill a room with the books and articles written on it. But I've distilled it down to 3 or 4 primary drivers. And if we work on those, it's like 80 or 90% of what we need to work on. And they are the mindset. So the collective mindset that's operating within that organization, the behavior that flows from that mindset, and also the language that keeps supporting that mindset. Now, I may meet a culture that's not performing, that's in overload, and I can start to see from the mindsets that are active there and the behavior that's flowing from those mindsets, I can see why that is. And that's where you really need to start the shift. You need to start with leadership, and you need to spread out then into the organization. So let me just give you an example of mindsets. I've created 4 mindset distinctions, and really this is from how we develop, from when we're born. We go through these 4 stages, 4 mindsets, clusters of mindsets, 4 thinking styles, if you like. And the first one is when we're first born. So I'm sure many of you out there have young children of, 0 to 3 or 4. Some of you may not have them now, but you have had them. And then some of you may not have children, but you've been that child. So the very first mindset that we have is a child's mind is full of wonder. It creates wonder. So from its mindset of wondering about the world and where the world is just an adventure for it, it creates a mindset. And I call that mindset the magical mindset. And that magical mindset you can define as the beliefs behind it are anything is possible and there's no limits. So that's the first mindset. We have that up until we're about 3 or 4, but we never lose it. So currently we're carrying around with us the ability to activate that mindset, that magical mindset. You activate it when you go to the movies, for instance. You activate it whenever you're in the flow of your imagination, whether you're reading a novel, whether you're listening to music, if you're painting, people who are actually labeled creatives in the world, that's the state they want to access, that flow state of magical thinking where anything is possible and there's no limits. Once a writer gets into editing themselves, there's the limits. They're no longer in that world. So we can still access that. Then the second mindset is the one that develops out of that, around about 5, 6, 7. And in that time of our lives, we have our first heroes. So our first heroes are our parents, our grandparents, siblings, and so on. Quickly it becomes into superheroes, but the belief behind it, and we call this the heroic mindset. The belief behind it is, I'm unstoppable. I can do anything. And no doubts. So now we've got no doubts in that. And you ask a child who's 7 or 8, what are they going to be when they grow up? And they tell you. They might tell you 3, 4, 5 things that they're going to be when they grow up. They're not worried about how they do it. They just know that they're going to do it. Now, whether they do or not, that doesn't matter. That mindset is the mindset that would take them there. And we never lose that mindset. So we've still got that heroic mindset. And we activate that mindset Whenever we start something new out of choice, we're in that mindset. So if we've got a new job, or we've got a new a new home, or a new relationship, we're heroic. We feel heroic. The other time we feel heroic and we access that state is when we accomplish something. Particularly if we accomplish something we weren't that certain we would make. Then there's that real heroic feeling. And we also get into heroic when there's a crisis. Or rather, some people do. There's a crisis, some people go heroic, other people go helpless. So I would imagine in this crisis now, some people are going heroic, some people are going helpless. Then the next stage, or the next mindset, we now sort of cross a bridge, because those two were growth mindsets. They're part of our fundamental growth whenever we access those mindsets. But the other two are more fixed mindsets. And when we're around, well, teenagers get into this. It's what we call the resign mindset. And the resign mindset, instead of I can, which was heroic, we go to I can't. Now, when we grow up as children, we're told you can't do that so many times. I mean, we're constantly told that. That doesn't create a resigned mindset. What creates a resigned mindset is when we internalize that. And actually, it's not our parents saying, you can't do that. It's us saying, I can't do that. And the resigned mindset now has doubts and limits. So that's where we start to generate limiting beliefs. It's where we start generating doubts around our beliefs that something can be done. And actually, if you think about it, how many people do you think are out there in the world of 7 billion who actually live in that resigned state? And many of them are blaming, you know, there's a lot of blame there as to why they're in those conditions. The fourth mindset is actually not just I can't, but no one can. Now this, you've really made this, you've generalized the I can't to no one can. Or if they can, so what? Who cares? That's part of this mindset. And we call this the cynical mindset. And this now has no possibilities. So we went from the magical, where anything is possible, to the cynical, where there's no possibilities. And you just ask yourself, you know, in your business, if you're in a meeting room and somebody throws out the cynical comment, what happens? Usually stops the meeting, stops the communication. So they're the four mindsets. And what I'd like you to do actually is see these as like new glasses that you could wear. That I was going to say when we get back to work, but we may not get back to work for a while. But on your Zooms, on your team meetings and so on, with your memory, look at those mindsets. They're so prevalent in every organization. And my challenge, amongst many others, this is just one aspect of the transformation, is to get a critical mass. We may go in and find a critical mass in the resigned. By the way, I've always been asked, but Bart, isn't there a fifth one? And I say, well, what's that? Knowing what's coming. They say there's one in the middle called realistic, a realistic mindset. Well, there isn't, because each one of those creates reality. People who have that possibility mindset see possibilities everywhere. People who have the cynical mindset see very few possibilities.
If I could just come in there to try and help people relate this to a tangible kind of real life situation. Say that I was running a company that had been in kind of gradual decline. We tried to change our systems and processes around to adapt to that, to the shortcomings and the decline. But then, you know, now and it hasn't worked, and now we find ourselves in this global pandemic. I mean, what is it that you can do? You know, is it possible to turn that situation around? What would you say to the person that's at the helm of that company? Is all lost or not?
Well, no, I don't come from all lost. I mean, you would if you were in the cynical or resigned state. And that's what they might actually believe at this point. And there's no magic bullets to this, Will. So, you know, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But really, you do really have to work on, you know, what the first thing I would do with somebody is really understand whether they want to make it, whether they want to change, whether they want to make the transformation. Because unless they really do want to do that, then it's just going to be lip service. And there's a lot of that around. But if they do really want to make the change, then yes, it can be done. It can even be done in this environment and this climate. You know, we're already working with clients where we've transferred they're usually they are always very intense programs, but we're moving them to remote. But it's really about having the intentionality. I think that's the first thing you have to build. Because a company like that it's probably lost its intentionality. So what you're going to do is you're going to build an intentional mindset to actually move out of what we used to call business as usual, because their business as usual is not working for them.
Absolutely. Paul, if we could bring you in here, given your background and how the two, you and Bart, there's kind of synergy between the two in your kind of operations. I mean, you obviously have a lot of specialism in terms of tech acquisition and advising companies in similar situations and advising why technology is so important. What are the conversations that you'd have to that chief executive?
Well, I'm going to comment directly back to Bart's comment there on intentionality and having that mindset. It's spot on from everything that I've seen, all the companies we talk with and case studies, et cetera. And I guess the two examples I would use are Amazon and Walmart, the classic case, the duel in the US. Amazon, and I gave a webinar a couple of weeks ago and described this story. Amazon has come from nowhere. It was a tiny little bookseller in 1996 with a crappy little website. No one imagined that Amazon would ever get close to taking on Barnes & Noble or Borders Books. And in fact, we all now know in hindsight, it's blown that away. And it's now a $1 trillion company, and it's continuing to succeed even in this pandemic. And the reason, there's only one reason. The reason is the mindset of Jeff Bezos. And Bart, I'd be interested to hear your views on him. His mindset is, of course, it's growth mindset, but it's always day one. We're always reinventing, regenerating, transforming ourselves. We're always growing, and there is nothing that's going to stop us. Okay, we may get stopped here and there. We'll go round it over through it, but it's always day one. Now, what's interesting is, one of the biggest potential victims of Amazon, of which now we know there are many, just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen go down. Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, I've read a few more today, I think in the UK, Accessorize, Monsoon, list goes on and on. But one in the US, Walmart, said, we're not going to go down that route. And Doug McMillon, the CEO, said, we are not going down that route. And he made a decision with his team to change the trajectory of being on the decline and not being cynical or being resigned that, oh, it's Amazon's here. They're the best. They're the fastest. They've got all the capital, or at least they have the ability to raise money and attract capital. They're attracting all the talent. There's no way we can do it. We've got 5,500 stores, bricks and mortar. Too difficult. How can we possibly compete against this new machine that's entered our universe and it, by the way, is determined with its mindset to take us out? And that wasn't the case. They didn't have a resigned mindset. The mindset was, no, we're the leader in U.S. retail, and we're going to take them on. We're going to beat them. And the first thing we're going to do, if we can't do this in-house, is acquire the very best e-commerce platform we can find, which was Jet.com. And they paid a 13 times revenue multiple, $3.3 billion for that site, that platform, which had only been built 18 months earlier. And one of the reasons was the people. Mark LaHore and the team, they had the same mindset, a similar mindset, I'm sure, of Jeff Bezos, which is, we're winners. We're going to win. We will do whatever it takes to win.
Yeah.
And that mindset came into Walmart and completely transformed and re-energized Walmart, the company. And now Walmart started believing it could do all the things that Amazon could do. And it did it. Amazon went on to acquire, I don't know how many it was, 9 or 10 other digital brands. And then a year and a half, 2 years later, it acquired in India, a Indian e-commerce company for, I think it was $17, $18 billion. Now, wind back the clock to 2014, 2015, it would be very difficult to imagine the relatively conservative board of Walmart acquiring an e-commerce player in India, but they did it. And Walmart is continuing to innovate now in-house, filing for patents and continuing to acquire. And it's one of the best examples that I can give, a real life example of that mindset. And it's what we see. And that's not the only example. There's several others. McDonald's for sure is doing a similar thing. So it is entirely possible. And what I tell companies, Will, is that there is no reason why any company should think that it's different from Walmart, from McDonald's, from GM, JP Morgan, Santander, these other companies that have gone on to do what others said, well, we can't do it. And there's no difference. Any company can do it. There's nothing special. I mean, I'm interested to hear Bart's view on this as it comes down to organizational behavior and cultures and so on. But there's no difference between one company being able to do it and another, apart from what's up here, what they believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just our interpretations that if you interpret you are different and you create that belief and you live with that belief, then that will limit you. The one thing about mindset is that one of the things I say is that you cannot outperform your mindset. So wherever your mindset is now, that's going to limit your performance. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, look at it in sports. A great example. Look at the classic one that's used, that the 4-minute mile. People believed that it couldn't be done. Doctors would say physiologically we can't do it. And then the minute it was done, or the 4 minutes it was done, then how many others broke the 4-minute mile after that? Because they had a new mindset. I used to be a mountaineer. And in mountaineering, it was always thought that you couldn't go beyond 20,000 feet. That actually something about the human system, we would die beyond that. And of course, people went beyond 20,000. Then it became the belief, well, you couldn't go beyond 20,000 without oxygen. And so people kept to the oxygen until somebody didn't. And now, every major peak has been climbed solo and without oxygen. It's limitations, and the limitations are the ones we put ourselves. It's incredible. I love my work. I mean, it's the best job you could have. Because looking at people transforming into growth, and in an organization where that new mindset, that growth mindset, that starts to take off, and what's important with transformation in an organization is momentum and critical mass. So why a lot of these don't work is they don't get enough momentum behind them, and they don't get enough critical mass to really make a difference. But once you get that, it's explosive, it's amazing. People start to enjoy their work far more, because culture is the medium we exist in, in our workplace. So the culture that's working and alive in the workplace is the medium we live in, and it either helps and benefits and allows us to grow, or it does the opposite.
Actually, if I could just come in there quickly with a question from our audience. Nigel Hall asks, in a transformation, he agrees that culture is very important, but he feels that you often get great mindsets, but those great mindsets have limited capability on the journey to transform. So what experiences can you share on how to manage that challenge?
That's a good question. Yeah, Bart, you want to take that? It's really about the execution.
It's the execution, yeah. So no, it's not all culture, by the way, but culture is the medium you're going to grow from. So, think gardening, think cultivation. And once you start to grow, you can't just leave it to that first transformation of mindset and so on. Execution is really what makes a difference.
So can I ask you, Bart, on that? Because I've always had this question for you, and I keep coming back to it, because I'm living and breathing every day the all of the barriers that come down into the system, into the corporate system, whatever you want to call it, and also the immune system that kicks in. Typically, middle management, you get the immune
Absolutely.
system.
Yeah.
It just rejects, whatever is trying to change it or transform it, whether it's culture or not. So how do you, and I know you don't like the how question so much, but everybody wants to know.
I don't
how does it
mind
actually, how does it work if you work over 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years? Is it just the follow-up and accountability and staying on track through that accountability, reminding people? Is it ensuring, checking that they're behaving differently based on what they had agreed on earlier on in sessions? I mean, you got to give us something here about how you can execute the delivery of the mindset throughout the organization.
Well, I don't mind the how question. I always separate the what questions from the how. So I never get those two confused. So whenever we're looking at creating an outcome or designing an outcome, that's a what question. So I work on that until we get that very, very clear and very, very clarified before I start to work on how. Look, how this works is, or how my approach works is to get an intensive session with the people who lead this organization to get them clear about where their current reality is, get them clear about where they want to go, and actually get them to examine all the belief systems and mindsets that are operating now that will get in the way of that, and then start to work to shift those and change those and transform those. And what's particularly important to reinforce that is the language. And what we want to do in that first session is shift the trajectory of the organization. So it's already on a trajectory. Let's call it the business as usual trajectory. We need to shift that trajectory as of then, come out of that and start working into and living into this new trajectory. So what makes that work? Well, what makes that work is follow through. So one of my mantras is there is no breakthrough without follow through. And so what you've got to do is you've got to have a follow through structure for success, if you like, where you can keep checking in to make sure you're on the trajectory you designed and you're working at the right level of progress. Like I said, the momentum and the critical mass as you move along that trajectory. That trajectory may be doubling your business. That trajectory may be making you far more innovative. And if you like, the enemy of this, the enemy of this working is business as usual. It's like the gravitational pull to come back to doing the things you've always done in the way you've always done them with the language you've always used.
Even though they're developing new strategies along the way.
Yeah.
That's what I find so interesting is, I'll talk to a company and they say, hey, we're doing this. We've got our plan. And then 2 years later, I'll come back and the share price is still continuing down. And it's on a straight trajectory after 5 years and nothing's really changing. I mean, there is change, but there isn't any real change. Whatever new that's introduced is not having any impact on the ultimate stakeholder results.
Yeah, well, a lot of people believe in that it's the strategy that makes it work. But actually, what I've seen companies put an enormous amount of effort, energy, investment into a new strategy that they hope will transform them. It's seen as a transformational strategy. It's described that way. But what they do is they put the same people into it. They put the same people into it to execute it with the old business as usual mindset. And I think that's the biggest threat of working this way and working towards transformation. That's what happens. And just to finish answering the question about changing the mindsets, but the people don't have the capability. You do find that. So, some of the most successful programs I've done in partnership with clients, we have found people wanting. There's two ways you can change people. You can get them to change themselves or you can change them out. And you do need to do that if you're ambitious enough. And it's in everybody's, look, it's in everybody's advantage to do that, because the people who can't keep up with this or won't keep up with this, then they're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know you've got questions, Will, mounting up. I just wanted to make one comment briefly on that. It's one of the things that we have seen as almost a consolation prize, a bonus. Sometimes it's a driver of a techquisition, where an established company acquires this fast-growing tech disruptor, digital company, is that it shocks the system, and the people in the acquirer who are not in favor of that deal and feel strongly against it for whatever reason, very often it's fear, are naturally impelled to leave. They end up leaving, and the ones who work for the acquirer who might have left are more inclined to stay, because they're excited by the deal, excited for what it means. It's senior management and the board giving a stamp of approval of growth and taking risk and going in the right direction where the puck's going. And now they're more inclined to stay. And that's your best talent, typically, the talent you do not want to leave. And that today is more likely to leave than ever before. You really don't want to lose. I just wanted to say that it's become really quite an important catalyst to take into consideration about the capability of people in an organization. Sorry, Will, I think you had it.
Well, on that point, so it's all quite closely related. So we've had a question from Danielle Rashiz. She says, do you think that people can be molded to the culture, or do you always have to have the culture in mind when selecting a person? And I guess in answering that question, I think if there's an opportunity there to broaden it out to the acquisition, going back to the acquisition scenario, and these merging of potential clashes of two different cultures between the acquiring company and the tech company that's been bought. How do you go about managing that potential, the threat, the risk of the clash of cultures? And Paul, I mean, when you're advising companies in that respect, how does the culture of the organization come into the advisory work that you give to clients?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great question. It really is. It's a great question because I've seen it. And I want to be careful not to give too many specifics, but I have seen senior executives who have great experience and capability in digital, for example, digital transformation, come in as a head of innovation or chief digital officer or something like that to a large organization. And Bart, you talk about language. I find that, say the second or third meeting that I'll do, the language becomes one of the organization rather than an individual. And that individual is talking more about frankly, the constraints of the organization rather than what the possibilities could be for that organization based on that individual's own experience and capability. So there's a process of indoctrination that can happen where I think the person can be molded to the culture. And if it's a great culture, there's not anything necessarily wrong with that. I think some people would subconsciously select a culture to join so they can be molded and grow. But why would someone want to work for Amazon, for example, or for Microsoft today? Right? That's a good example. I want to learn and grow and be mentored by hard driving executives who want to, like Jeff Bezos, take over the world. So there's that element, but then there's also the opposite. So I could talk for that just for my own sake for a very long time. It's a great question. And in terms of the deals, we absolutely bring culture into our deal. Ever since I've been doing M&A advisory for nearly 30 years now, even tech deals, tech companies selling to a tech company, absolutely, it's critical. But it's more important in a non-tech established company acquiring or investing in, taking a major position in a software company or digital company or tech company. It's more important, but it can also be more powerful, right? Because you're bringing together two opposite ends of a magnet that can attract. It can be incredibly powerful because in certain ways, both parties really want each other and they can learn a lot from each other, but you've got to get it right. And that process does involve a lot of psychometric testing. It involves a lot of different perspectives. The last thing you want to do is base these kind of culture decisions on interviews or even just hiring one, talent assessment firm to come in and do some interviews. It's got to be 360 and quite thorough. But it's critical. It's one of those hidden gems. When you get it right, that can really make a big difference. But that's my perspective, Bart. I don't know if you've got a...
Yeah, I can add to that. You can tease a few things out here. Well, in terms of my belief, the cultural fit is so important when you're recruiting somebody that you should never ignore that. And one of the things my company does is spend much more time now on is this a culture fit? Because in the past we've not spent enough time on that, and we've got somebody who's very competent. So the competency there, but the culture isn't. And actually, I do a lot of coaching, C-level coaching, and so on at the moment remotely because of the situation, and a lot of the issues are around that it's a lack of cultural fit. It's not working within the culture and so on. And I think that if you think about it, in this, Tom Friedman wrote a book, The World is Flat, and sort of put into words and into the system that the world is flat because now companies have access to more or less the same resources globally. Whereas I know when I was in the corporate world, Unilever's strength, or Price Waterhouse, I was there, their strength was a lot to do with their scale and sort of the information they could have that their competitors couldn't, and so on. That's sort of disappearing now. So one of the things that is absolutely your competitive advantage is your culture, if you make it that way. So that's why it's so important, I think. And the other thing is there's some very expensive mistakes if the culture fit isn't right when you employ somebody. They can create some very expensive mistakes. And in that, I worked with one of my favorite clients and programs, which I was working with them for 7 years or so. And, we doubled the business. We doubled the business in 6 years, actually. We went for 5, but we got it in 6. We tripled the market value in that time. And then towards the end of that, the CEO I was working with decided he wanted to step back into the chairman position. And I advised him then there wasn't anybody in the organization that could become CEO. So I advised him, well, why don't you take a CEO that it would be that person's last assignment, and their role is also to groom somebody from inside, because it was the culture was it was a family concern, more or less. So ideally they would have promoted from inside. So they did that, but they got the wrong person. And I'm not giving any names out here, but I said, no, not that person, but that's what was recruited. And I tell you, within months, he was already eroding the culture because of the position he had. And what he did immediately, he brought fear in. And what I could see is that he was a transactional leader, not a transformational leader. So the previous leader who I'd worked with, and we'd done this amazing growth, he was a transformational leader. That's what he was looking for. He himself wanted to grow. He was transforming things for himself and the business. And this other person that came in was transactional, completely transactional. So it was look, if you're loyal to me, I'll look after you. Yeah. If you don't speak out to me, I'll look after you. That was it. The transaction was the deal on how you get ahead with me as your CEO. And people started leaving. The whole energy of the place, it started to plateau in its performance. So culture fit is so important.
And what about, so one more question on the acquisition front? Because quite often these two organizations will have contrasting cultures, but do you try to preserve the two? It's like for the two to have a kind of symbiotic relationship, because ultimately I'd imagine that in some situations, the tech company, the culture that drives them is very important to their success. Similarly, in some of the long established companies, you know, the more corporate culture that they have might not necessarily be, might be more effective for them personally. So do you try and manage the two together to coexist or not?
So yeah, I can take that one first, I guess. The answer is, in general, yes. You keep the companies separate. You keep the companies separate, and yet you're part of the same family, so to speak, and you're working towards the same goal, towards the same business plan. And you typically wouldn't want to do a deal. You wouldn't want to agree a deal, whatever deal it is. It could be a joint venture, it could be a strategic, you know, important strategic investment, or an acquisition, or a deal that has a path to control. You wouldn't want to agree that without a clear business plan, without expectations, without accountability, including if so-and-so leaves, what happens? So taking into account all the things that you hope don't happen, but could happen. A little bit like a prenup agreement. You know, what if the worst happens? How do we handle that? So if you go through that exercise properly and you maintain your separate identities, but you're both growing together, then what I have found is that over the long term, which is whatever you define it in your industry, 5, 10 years, the target company becomes more empowered in terms of what it believes it can do, now that it's part of this much larger infrastructure platform of the acquirer, of the larger company that makes the acquisition. And the acquirer, you know, assuming this is a successful deal and not one that blows up, if the deal is going more or less to plan and it's working well, then the acquirer's culture tends to bend. And that's why I use this term bend rather than break. The acquirer's culture bends towards where that fast-growing tech company is taking it. It's something that is relatively subtle, and sometimes it happens through cross-fertilization of people, not just ideas. So certainly you're going to have cross-fertilization of ideas, you know, as often as you can. Yeah. That's one of the main reasons why you do these deals. In fact, when McDonald's acquired Dynamic Yield last year for about $300 million, I think, Daniel Henry, the global CIO, said, look, one of the main reasons we did this deal was for the people, for the data scientists and the people that come with it, because they can move fast. And they can move fast with us. We want to move fast as a company. We want to continue growing. We want to give our customers the very best food experience, whatever we're going to give them in the future as we have this new world of holograms and VR and AR, et cetera, and new types of food, by the way. We want to be the leader there. And so we want people who can help us and move fast. And so I think what we're going to find, just in this example with McDonald's, I think going forward 3, 4, 5, 10 years, the culture of McDonald's will be more influenced by these companies that they're acquiring, because the people in the companies they're acquiring are having a greater influence on the direction, the vision, the strategy, and the execution of the acquirer's strategy.
Fantastic. Bart, do you have any final comments that you want to throw in on that, or?
No, I mean that I believe that. So I think one thing, if you're running an organization with different cultures in it, purposefully, intentionally, the one thing you need to do is make sure that they're all aligned. So they could have differences in character and differences in some of the beliefs, but they do need to be aligned, because that misalignment is the thing that causes problems, costs money, and can lead to failure.
And I've got to add just one comment on that. It's something that Jim Collins pointed out in Good to Great, where you get all the right people on the bus first. And what you want to have when you've got the right people on the bus is debate. You want a team and people on the bus that trust and respect each other, if not admire each other, and can have arguments frequently without taking it personally, right? Bart, I mean, you want that healthy disagreement so that you're fully flushing out all the possibilities before you end up deciding on something and then aligning on it, because it's absolutely our starting point, in our 12-step acquisition model. The first one is we created a step 0 so that the executive committee gets clarity and alignment. It's just critical. You've got to get the alignment, but you have to have that thorough debate first. And if you don't have a healthy culture, it's just more difficult to do.
If I could just leave our audience with an idea that you go back to your organization, remotely or otherwise, and just look at three things around the culture itself. How intentional is it? And how intentional are you? Intentionality is the sort of muscle that we have that drives us to the results we want. So intentionality is the thing that allows us to take our intentions and create realities from them. So how intentional are you, and how clear are you about where you want to go? The second thing is, how outcome focused are you? Because a lot of companies are not outcome focused, and delving into the weeds, you'll find that the focus is somewhere else. Some are very political, so the focus is on the politics. Sometimes the focus is on different aspects of success, or sometimes the focus is on what's being done rather than the outcome that you want from it. So how intentional are you as an organization? How outcome focused are you? And are you working in stretch? Because, there's three types of culture, in a sense, broad types of culture. There's a culture of complacency and low effort, low results. There's a culture of overwhelm, which is usually high effort, low results. And then the sweet spot is a stretch culture. So are you in stretch? Are you in stretch individually? Can you get your team into stretch? And then can you get your organization into stretch? And if you start to look at those three things, you will start to see different results.
And we actually have one final question, which is from Ivan Giro, and he asks, it wouldn't be a Q&A session without a question about COVID-19. So he says, what's your personal perspective on COVID and its impact on the business world, and what will be just a change and ultimately just change back afterwards, and what will be a transformation, so it will remain changed forever? Paul, I know that this is an area that you have commented on and written about extensively a lot, so I don't know if you want to throw in any questions.
I'll try and be brief, because I know we're out of time, and I know Bart will have something more interesting to say than me on this. I actually think a lot of our behavior and how we live will go back to the way it was. I really do. We have short memories, so we'll have a vaccine eventually, and whether it's a year or 2 years, it'll go back mainly to the way. And I think we'll have more airline travel than before. Once people have that sense of security back. So the one thing that I do think will change for sure is remote working. And we're already seeing it. So Twitter has announced that all of its staff permanently now can work remotely. It was Facebook, I think they expect half of their staff by 2030. It'll probably be earlier than that, 2025, if not even earlier, that we'll see that staff. So I think that is the one thing that for sure we'll see a little bit less business travel. By the way, we don't take into account how much these platforms are going to improve. Zoom and Microsoft Teams, Skype, whatever you're using, they're going to get better and better and better. And they're going to get better faster. There's huge amounts of capital going into these platforms right now because there's a race to be the best. And I don't mean just better in terms of, user friendliness and positioning video screens and so on. I mean adding in hologram and augmented reality capabilities so that it becomes a platform more than just a 2D platform and more than just videos, but all kinds of tools we'll be able to use, particularly in engineering and education, that will change the way we work, certainly. It'll change the way we work, the way we interact with each other. It'll change the way we commute and travel. So that, for me, is, without any question, going to be the one big change we'll see.
And Bart, the final word, over to you. Do you have any comments on that?
I think many people will want it to go back to how it was. Because it's a comfort zone and it's something we're familiar with, and there's a need for certainty, and we're in a world now where everything is uncertain. So I think there'll be a drive for that. I think it will be a shame if that's what happens, because we're going through this, we're going through this unknown period where we've been pushed out of our comfort zone, where people are dying, where it's something we wouldn't have wished, and we're having to change things just to exist. And I think to go back to business as usual after that, we'll have missed the opportunity to make some real transformations in the world. And while ways of working will change, like you said, with video and so on, I would want to see that values change as we go through this and we come back to, why wouldn't we come back to a better world than the one we left? So that's not really predicting what will happen. That's really saying what I would like to see happening as a result of this.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you. Well, we've a bit beyond the time I said at the start, so apologies for that.
Well, thanks for keeping with us, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel as though we could keep on going, but anyway, we've run out of time. But
we'll do another one.
Indeed, we'll do another one.
Version 2.0.
But if you would like to continue the conversation with Paul and Bart, you can reach Paul at paulc@aquapartners.com and Bart at breakthroughglobal.com. And I have actually just posted those email addresses in the group chat, so everybody should have them. But yeah, so thank you very much, everybody. And we'll be sending the recording of the Zoom conversation around within the next 24 hours. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.